I'd probably be a price realist in some sense, right? Like, I think but it's gonna like supervene on like natural facts, right? Because it may turn out that there is like, according to markets, if they're working at perfect efficiency, there is like a correct price that a particular good should be set at.
I assume you're a fan of those arguments, right? I mean, me too. I wanted to see what you make of companions in innocence type of argument, right? Um, which we use the parity premise, right? Um, and we put, let's say, something like if moral realism is true, the type that you believe in, um, then realism about price value is also true, right? And then the second premise would be moral realism is true, and the conclusion would be realism about prices is true, right? And price realism is the position that um, the price value of products and services exist independent of our preferences and desires, and it's irreducibly normative. It has those properties, and we discover it with our intuition. And it also, such as the moral properties, also it navigates our conduct, right? So, for example, um, if something is like too expensive, we say things like we shouldn't buy it, or if something is too cheap, we say, yeah, maybe we are getting scammed. Like we intuit that something is wrong here about the price, right? And we can go through like the moral anti-realist position quickly and like debunk them. Price anti-realist position, I should say. Like, just think about like subjectivism about prices. Well, that's certainly not what's happening, right? Imagine me walking in a Ferrari shop and saying, yeah, this Ferrari like costs $1. You ought to sell it to me. Well, if subjectivism about prices were true, right? Then I didn't say anything false. I said something true, right? So they ought sell it to me for $1. Well, that's obviously an absurd position. Um, so we rule it out. Then we have like error theory about prices. Like the price error theorist wants to say, um, look, the statement um, a Ferrari costs more than a bucket of poo is false. Well, I mean, that's obviously true, right? Like everybody knows that. Like we can ask people if they think that actually a Ferrari is more expensive than a bucket of poo. Everybody would say that's true. So error theory just seems very implausible, right? It says that the price is this strange thing, um, that it's like very queer, but um, it's just not plausible. We use the price words every day, right? We evaluate things as expensive and cheap, and if the price is right, it gives us a good reason to buy the thing. Um, and obviously, in the end, you have like non cognitivism about prices, which just says that price statements are non propositional. But that view is gonna struggle from like Frege Geach objection. And also, if we look at the world, it doesn't seem that, like, if Cartesian were to say this thing costs €1, he's just expressing himself. Like, what? He's uttering a proposition here. That's either true or false, right? He's talking about the thing itself. Um, so if I apply the reasoning of Michael Humer, right, I can just as well defend, you know, um, Price anti-realism with the same reasons that he gives for moral realism. So I don't see how are you going to, disparate what property you are going to point that price realism doesn't have, that realism have, such that you can reject price realism by being free of contradiction, right? Based on what I said, I think if you accept moral realism, like the non-natural kind, um, you are logically committed to also accepting non-naturalism about prices. What do you think of that?
I guess the first thing I'd say is like the reason I personally think lean towards non-naturalism is just sort of based upon what appears to be true to me, rather than companions and guilt arguments or whatever. I think it's a fun argument. I think there's going to be defeaters for price realism. Like a number of defeaters for price realism come to mind. We know what prices are. how and why prices, um, you know, why something comes to be a particular price and so on. So, there seems to be disparity there. Um,
Yeah, but what
I
doesn't
guess
stop me to
again, like,
say same thing about morality?
I'm sorry.
What stops me from saying the same thing about morality? What you just said about prices. It seems like, morality is like our approvals, disapprovals, our attitudes. Um, we can perfectly account, for everything in the world without moral realism. I can apply your reasoning into moral realism, is what I'm saying, if you aim to disparity them.
Oh, right. And so what I was saying was that, like, I would think we would have like some defeaters for price realism, right? We would think that, like, we know how prices come to be applied to certain things, and like, um, given what we know about prices, we would have defeaters for the belief that price realism is false, or for the belief that price realism, we'd have defeaters for that.
Yeah, but the claim needs to be that those reasons cannot apply to moral realism.
Oh, like, okay, let me see if I can think of a defeater here. I happen to know stuff about prices, right? I know that I can arbitrarily set a price on something, you know. Like, I've sold stuff at a garage sale before, so you know, I know how to set prices. I know that they are set at specific things. I know I can change them. So that seems to be like a defeater for price realism.
Well, the fact that you were setting prices, right, um, doesn't mean that you actually picked the right price, right? We say things like, so for example, a person brings me pizza, right? Um, and I'm saying, damn, this guy like works so well and he's being paid so little. He's being underpaid. He ought to be paid more. The correct price of his services, like, you know, the value of his services, like, the price is much higher than it is, right? So I intuit that the price were wrong. And then if you accept like anti-realism about prices, how are you going to explain things like, the show like the price is wrong, for example? I think, of
Uh,
course, this is a fun argument, but I think price realism may have more things going on about it than what we think. Because currently I hold the position and I hope that, I'm like probably gonna publish a paper on it or something, like a quite ambitious one, attempting reductio ad absurdum on Michael humor. But currently I think everything that I know is going to support the inference, right? I can apply all the reasons he applies to price realism, and if there is an objection, um, I can use the same reasoning against moral realism. I don't see what's stopping me.
oh, so I guess I'm probably, like, this is like getting us off track. I'd probably be a price realist in some sense, right? Like, I think that it's gonna like supervene on like natural facts, right? Because it may turn out that there is, like, according to markets, if they're working at perfect efficiency, there is like a correct price that a particular good should be set at.